I wanted, yeah, okay, I'll wait too. I wanted to, again, thank everybody for coming. We have people from New York State, from California, from Texas, from many, many places, Ohio and many places. So thank you. And 50 right now, and I think there'll be more. New Mexico yesterday lost a poet, a damn good poet and a friend to many of us, and Bob Warren, R.B. Warren, and his wife, Barbara, both died of COVID-19. They lived down in Los Lunas, just south of Albuquerque. And his book, Litanies Not Adopted, from Swimming with Elephants Press, came out a couple of years ago. I think you could still get it. I know you can still get it through Bookworks. And it's a tremendous book. And he was somebody that spent much of his life working with the poor and with Habitat for Humanities and with other charities. A wonderful man. So I just wanted to begin by reading one short poem from Bob Warren from Litanies Not Adopted. And this is called The Sun. The sun is over the mountain, and the warm early morning light points to the table where lately what work I do is done. Write something, it says, anything. Mark the page, disturb the whiteness of the sheet. Bring meaning to this less than chaos. Do something with years and space. This time, make use, make do, be used. Bob Warren. And thanks to Billy Brown, who also has been forwarding, and Bill Nevin's been forwarding poems by Bob. So thanks. Our first featured poet, Hilda Raz, lives in Placitas and is currently series editor for poetry at the University of New Mexico Press. She had been the editor of Prairie Schooner, a well-known journal for many years. And she was the first Luschei Professor and Editor in the Department of English at the University of Nebraska. She's also past president of the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, been a visiting writer at Stanford, Pennsylvania State, the University of Iowa, the University of Florida, too many schools to name, and also worked in MFA programs. She's published 13 books as a poet, nonfiction writer, and editor. And her new book is called List and Story. I think she has it to hold up. And Sandy does. List and Story from Stephen F. Austin University Press, which is available through Bookworks and Amazon and so forth. And she's also, I don't know how she does all of these things. She's also on the board of directors of Arbor Farm Press. She's also the poetry editor for Bosque Literary Journal, which is a really nice magazine that comes out of this area. And she's a neighbor of ours. So please welcome Hilda Raz.
Thank you so much, Jules and John. What a pleasure to be here with you all. Great. List and Story is my new book, and we decided that I should read tonight only from List and Story. What does the title mean? It signals surprise and obsession. I am absolutely in love with the catalog poem, The List, as well as the narrative poem, The Story, whereas the catalog poem with its lists invites the reader to make a story. The story poem or the narrative poem, to my way of thinking, closes it out. I love them both. They seem to speak to one another. I wanted to talk a little bit about collaboration. And the cover signals the first collaboration I wanted to mention, and that's with artist Karen Kunk. She's a brilliant, internationally acclaimed artist, and I asked for this piece in exchange for writing the catalog copy for a fine arts exhibit that she had. She had asked me to do that. So instead of paying, I bartered for this piece. So I've lived with it for many, many years. And part of me thinks that I actually wrote the book around the cover. Okay, let's go. In all my years of writing, I realized that I had not written a poem about my father. He was an interesting man who left school at 12 to start delivering groceries for his mother, who was a single parent, and she owned a grocery store. So this is the very first poem I'll read to you. It's on page 8 for those of you who have the book in front of you. It's called Transportation. My father bought a wagon to deliver groceries, then the shoe store's leathers, the mercantile's piles of rugs and towels, or anything else those neighbors needed, carried from one place to another. Then he got a truck, more trucks and a terminal building, a phone and a typewriter and billing pads, and put his mother to work in the front office with an adding machine, a gas pump, and a motto: "We move everything but the world." He bought a Packard, broke his back doing some fool thing in the alley, married Dolly, pretty but helpless, and over years moved the family from Harvard Street behind the skating rink to Highland Heights in spite of covenants against Negroes, Italians, and Jews. Nobody ever stopped him. Somehow money piled up enough to keep his widow and child for many years, until the fleet of trucks and buildings with his name and motto in rolled gold stopped, were shuttered, sold. Where is he now? A sliver of bone and serge dug into a closed cemetery's dirt? Or reborn as some ambitious boy in Agra with a taxi, ready to transport tourists and their stuff wherever they tell him to go, or wherever he wants them to go. And here's a survivor carrying stories from one life to another. Yours, readers. So that's how I thought about this book and my role in it, transporting these poems, these lists and stories to you, the readers. John, I have a question because, I'm playing with the views and I'm trying to get, I've got John on the screen. How do I get myself on the screen?
You're on the screen, Hilda.
You're on the screen for all of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think on you it might not be that way, but you're on it.
Okay. All right. I can't locate myself, so I can't see where to whom I'm speaking. Okay. All right. So as you know, I'm a teacher as well as a writer, and I write and teach both poetry and memoir. The next poem is based on the gender dynamic in my own classroom in a course that was called Women and Poetry, and still is. My first time teaching that seminar, I was terrified, let me tell you. And then I had to write this poem. Of course I had to write this poem, which was also scary. The final couplet took a very long time for me to find, and it was only last year when Sigrid Munitz's National Book Award winning novel, The Friend, came out, that I actually found the epigraph. So here's that poem. Okay, and one needs to be more technologically adept than I am. This poem is on page 19, Women and Poetry. Here's the epigraph. Among all my desires at the time, one of the strongest was to put my full trust in someone, in some man. They want to be told what's what by a man. Women at the north end of the table nodding together. One so newly married, she writes as if the poem is her writing hand, lonely for the ring. I wanted to be told what's lovely by a man, as I was by my famous teacher who taught women, especially the beauty seated on his right, to incite riot. Her pain seemed an ars poetica, her poems all naked body, enticingly sensual, flushed in sun and shower, come from the pool in stanza 1 to become in stanza 2 an erect and threatening penis in a changing room shared by a man and a girl. Was she the child? We wondered. What difference to the poem? In my class, we sat together in a darkening room late afternoon. I am trying to love poetry as a stay against confusion. Flesh for now a stay against death as lightning, incipient storm with its causal gods, breaks closer to morning. And now I write alone in the kitchen with only that growl to push me. No man's voice here, no transformation, only poetry. In that gender war, poetry wins. Okay. That wonderful line, I'm trying to love poetry as a stay against confusion, I stole from Robert Frost. I give him the credit in the notes. I always acknowledge my thefts. Okay, and here's another poem that's called April. In this poem, I decided to personify that spring month as an automaton. The one from, actually, the movie Blade Runner, movie I loved. You'll find women here too, placed among flowers, as used to be customary, to show that they're part of nature, the natural world, rather than culture, books, and learning. And here's April on page 27. Pale blooms on trees poets sheltered among, to become floral on their book jackets. We girls too stooped among lilacs for the camera to show we were nature. Photos of cousins among peach blossoms in the backyard were caught in a silver frame. Next, here we are too, posed among branches of magnolia, a nest. Did we forgive ourselves later, our skirts filled with scent as we crouched over the incense burner to get ready? Flower cups blooming on cactus as red as we were at the center. I never said I'd live among blooms for long, did I? In Blade Runner, he said, time to die, as he did, that beautiful automaton. I can never live through April without thinking of that movie. So beautiful and so created and so obsessed. Okay, I talked a little bit about collaboration, and it's compelling for many writers, me included. In this book, one of my collaborations is with early tales. I love them, talking with and back to their assumptions. The speaker in this poem may be the powerful old crone from Hansel and Gretel, and the other in the poem is that familiar, lush, and generative young woman we meet so many places in literature. This poem is called One Toe, Crooked, and it's on page 28. One toe, crooked. Let me tell you how it is with me. A bad back, spine like a snakeskin shed in the shadow of a pinelet, weakened innards, a liver fit for soup, and a brain the size of a lentil. The worst is the one toe, crooked like a staff carried too long by shepherds. One day, One day, a fine mid-autumn, with sun's eye full open against air's chill, I took to the woods to find my dinner. What with one thing and another, I swayed and shimmered my way along the path, gravel stuck to my knee from a fall, my felt shoes catching stones. But still, I got to the gate where geese cross, coming home from the pond. What would do me that night? I was one only, with an oven fit for a child with money, my prize. Each night I lit it with a faggot of willow and some wormwood leaves. It had an iron basket suspended over the fire, good for roasting corn and potatoes. Tonight I was hungry against the chill coming. No ice yet, that was full winter. But for now, a clutch of eggs to boil in the kettle. Truly then I saw a girl, lovely as a stalk of silver grain, come around a corner that an oak made with my barn wall. She carried a bundle, squirming like a peck of tadpoles, and clutched to her chest a stack of books bound with a strap. She saw me as a wraith and ran. Was I a wraith? My toe hurt like hell itself gaped open, but ectoplasm I wasn't, plain flesh. Still, she was afraid. Then I could see her babe's mouth open, its cries louder with each bounce, the flannel it was bound with coming loose. As I watched, standing bent over my toe, she dropped the books. The belt around them opened. Pages fanned out on the ground like parchment put to flame. What did all this mean in the daylight? The girl, her babe, the lost books cascading, and over everything pain ascending, covering our light, all that hope, the future somehow gone dark as a cavern. I bent over the mess, began to gather it up. That poem grew in my mind intact, absolutely intact. But in writing it, I became aware that the poem slowed down the poet. I wanted every detail to come from the crone's point of view. Is she imagining the girl? Is she a hallucination? Does the crone mean to gather up the baby and eat it, cooked in her marvelous stove? But contrary to stereotype, she gathers up the books, not the babe. Or does she? It's deliberately ambiguous whether she will also gather up the babe, who represents the future, of course, and nature, as opposed to culture, the books. Why? Well, I don't know, maybe to provide alternative mappings of life. We live, Jules and John and Dale and Hilda, in a magnificent place in New Mexico, in Placitas. This poem looks out our back window. I wanted to slow down the lines to approximate our wonder at seeing in snow such a sight. This is called a covey of scaled Quail, page 38. Our first year here, a covey of scaled quail. The bedroom shade is half drawn. Snow interrupts the field, cliffs of sand held together, intermittent shrub and rock. We wait by the window, frame of a white falling, a rush of cold against which our breath moves. Now dark interrupts the snow. Under the juniper slowly, the odd bird scurrying, then two, then a group that vacates in ranks the dark under and goes into fog. Covey, many. Where has this covey come from? Dry air sucks up snow, then leaves what falls to stay a while, as we do, inhabitants of another intermittence. Footprints to discover at dawn as cold drops over the mountain and we wake to watch another day. And here's the final poem in List and Story. It's another collaboration. Hilda Raz, an artist, and I were commissioned to make a sculpture, Aaron, and a poem based on the sculpture, me. His sculpture was a plexiglass cabinet on whose shelves were displayed a collection of lead objects, the size of type, and that resembled letters. Each one was separated in a small, transparent space. And here's my poem to go with Aaron's sculpture, Letters from a Lost Language, page 72. It too has an epigraph, this one from Jane Hirschfield. An alphabet's molecules, tasting of honey, iron, and salt, cannot be counted. Our life in minerals, wrote the poet, to call up the patient sea. He stands on sand called shore. Let me start again. Our life in minerals, wrote the poet, to call up the patient sea. He stands on sand called shore, salt, mustache. The letters come, are caught, arranged, erase. Here then is my life in letters, a great weight, a metal alphabet meaning nothing one can decipher. Patience, calls out the poet from the margins. One letter, like a chair, flexes toes. One is a sigh. I have tried all my life to carry weight from the margins to the center, one letter, then another, until the click of the box says stop. See the hasp of the lock on the transparent door? See the shadows? Is one a belt buckle? A woman swimming? One arm of a scissors, a chair, a man waving, a clown in a back bend, dog behind a bolt. Zzz, says the guard in the box as he bows his pregnant belly behind Cocopelli to make an urn. Shadows move to ease light from the museum windows. Soon we will find the metal key. Again the poet brushes salt into glowing shapes, and soon the fires will light, and we will return to mineral. Thank you so much for listening. I enjoyed being here with you all.
Wow,
Please.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Jules. You're filling my screen. Wonderful.
Can you unmute us, Jules? unmute everyone for applause.
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda.
Thank you, Hilda. Hold your book up
Nice
again, Hilda.
reading.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Hilda. That was delightful. And the information for List and Story is in the chat if people want to order it, which I'm sure many will. So
Thank you.
terrific.
Thanks so much.
And I must say, we love our quail here, both the scaled quail and the Gamble's quail. And
Hold on.
Gamble's quail about 2 weeks ago. So that was fun. Yeah. Okay. So good. Got a few more people coming in, which is
Yeah,
terrific.
thank you. And I put the book information on the chat, but it's List and Story by Hilda Raz. So support your local independent bookstore. And
Available at Bookworks and many other fine bookstores.
and thank you for we are getting donations in already. So thank you so much. And be supporting the poets, and Hilda's gonna give her half to Bookworks in Albuquerque. So
Cool. So we're going to move on to our next reader, who is Nathan Brown. He's an author, songwriter, award-winning poet, living in the hill country of Wimberley, Texas. And Nathan holds a Ph.D. in English and journalism from the University of Oklahoma, where he taught for over 20 years, was poet laureate of the state of Oklahoma, and now living in Texas. Also, when it's possible, he travels a lot, reading, playing guitar, singing, and doing workshops. And we've been fortunate that Nathan frequently would stop in New Mexico. We're like, okay, summer's here because Nathan's here, right? And he's done a couple of workshops and readings for Jules Poetry Playhouse, both in Albuquerque and in Placitas, and also done a number of house concerts for Scott Wigerman and David Meishin, which are wonderful events. And anyway, we were hoping to have a whole weekend songwriting workshop with him in, I think, April, but unfortunately things happened. But hopefully we'll be able to do that again. I should mention he has about 21 books, including a recent travel memoir, Just Another Honeymoon in France, a collection of poems called Karma Crisis. There was a finalist for the Patterson Poetry Prize and the Oklahoma Book Award. And earlier book, Two Tables Over, won the 2009 Oklahoma Book Award. And also, he has a CD of his own songs, which I highly recommend. It's called The Streets of San Miguel, and that just came out last year. And that title, the title song is just blows me away. So the Streets of San Miguel. So anyway, without further ado, Nathan Brown, so glad you could be here.
Hey, all right. Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it very much. Let's see, am I unmuted?
yes.
Okay, all right. So I appreciate it. And John, I think, by the way, you just gave the line from, all things where poetry begins, and then things happened. I think that's where all poetry begins, and then things happened, right? Yes. So, by the way, I do want to say thank you very quickly, John and Jules, you guys, for what you do for poetry and how you keep things alive. Scott and David, you've been a huge part of life in Austin and Albuquerque. Both your poetry stalwarts, and I deeply appreciate it. And to my cousin, Billy Brown. Thank you for all you do, sir, as well. I do appreciate it. I'm going to read, so my book, my most recent book is the one they were mentioning, Just Another Honeymoon in France. This is the first book in a series of books that will all carry the subtitle A Vagabond at Large. And I'm launching a new series of travel memoir books. Now, but in this book, 2 poems, you know, I can't not write poetry. So even when I'm writing prose, there's going to be there's going to be poems that spring up in that book. I want to read you just 2 quick poems from the travel memoir, Just Another Honeymoon in France. The first one is called, May the Fromage Be With You. It begins with a quote from the movie The Red Violin. My boy, play well, and there will be cheese. Violin, cheese. And on the 8th day, God said to the French, let there be cheese. He went on to say, and let there be cheeses of all colors, all kinds, from white to orange, even blue and green cheeses, hard cheese, soft cheese, from fragrant to noxious, from holy to moldy. And then God commanded that these cheeses go forth and multiply all throughout the homeland of the Gauls. And that mankind living in the land at that time should give names to all the cheeses, names that will be veritably unpronounceable to any living outside the land. Say Crottin de Chavignon, or Neufchâtel, or maybe Chabichou de Poitou. Then, in order for the French to be able to eat well all the days of their lives, God created the fromagerie, a wondrous little shiny store devoted entirely to cheeses, so the people of the land would always have a huge selection. And lo, the cheese will be with you always, even unto the end of the age. So that one came out in poetry form. You know, how could you not write that, you know, about the French in poetry? Because, and the French appreciate the poetry moments in the book. The second poem I want to read, this is a Paris poem. And the title of this is Poets, Pirates, and Painters. It begins with a quote from Baudelaire. And like an amorous whisper, the myriad music of life. Don't bend down too close to the ground here in Paris. All the dust, disappointments, and funereal unrests of its poets and pirates and painters, alive or dead now for centuries, will begin to whisper for you to come closer, then a little closer. There will be a secret they want to tell you. Céline said, the people in Paris always look busy when all they actually do is roam around from morning to night. If you put a hand over your eyes and stop gazing in the window of the Louvre or up at the Arc de Triomphe, you'll hear Cézanne muttering, we live in a rainbow of chaos. Or Monet's mournful lament, my life has been nothing but a failure. Baudelaire said, I speak of boredom, which with ready tears dreams of hangings as it puffs its pipe. And the dust in the cracks of the Quai Voltaire, the monumental disappointment of Charles Baudelaire, even the insatiable unrest of a Paul Gauguin or Picasso's hand, are not trying to push you away. They do not want you to leave. They merely seek your permission to step on your rose-colored glasses and toss them into the river Seine with a bow to common sense. Paris is the city of light that harbors many darknesses. Darkness is filled to the brim with such insufferable beauty. The reason so many of its songs are sad with love, its losses, and accordion tears. Thanks. And so, as per my tradition, cheers, everyone. You know, I mean, you know it's going to appear at some point. It's going to happen, right, John? All right, there you go. John, cans will do, whatever you got, all right? Yeah, so cheers, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. How fun. It's so fun to be in New Mexico. I miss it terribly, and especially this time of year when Texas happens to be a boiling witch's cauldron. And so I do miss the monsoon season. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. So I wish I could be there. So the next thing, I'm going to read just a few poems real quickly from my most recent poetry collection. It's called 100 Years. And this is a fairly new book for me. And what I did with this book was I wrote a poem for every year of life. So I started with 0. There's a year before we are an age. We are not 1 until our first birthday. So there's a whole year where we're 0. And I go all the way up through the age of 100. And I alternate between fictional male and female characters. None of them are about me. And so each one is a little tiny act of fiction. And I try to take on every age of life. I gave it my best shot. And so the first one I want to read you is a poem that I wrote for a 10-year-old girl. This has nothing to do with being a father of a daughter, okay? Now that I've made my disclaimer. Okay, here we go. This is called The Flip of a Switch. Within days of turning 10, her right fist shot up to her right hip with the right elbow pulled notably forward. And it has not been seen to relax for 1 minute since. To go along with that, her eyes have taken to rolling upwards with the drama and force of a Titan's blazing chariot dragging the sun behind it. And since her voice is steadily rising in pitch and volume, everyone else in the house feels like a hostage now, all waiting nervously to see how this pans out. Okay, so that's for the 10-year-old girl. Now the next poem, I'm going to jump way up in the age spectrum here. I'm going to go to a 58-year-old man. And this is based extraordinarily loosely on an old friend that I used to have who respected the poem and said, fine, go ahead and publish it. Just don't ever say my name. Okay, so that's where this is titled Restraint for a 58-year-old man. He arrived to the 1960s sometime in the mid-70s and was late to everything else for the rest of his life. He'd gone to a small Baptist university because the drugs were better and being a hippie was still somewhat exotic. But when the last of many nailed him to a set of vows and in came that first child, out went the guitars, the tie-dye t-shirts, a Godspell fro. From there, he went slowly and carefully insane, since up to that point, he'd been faking. He worked in some strange way for the government through a string of decades and 4 more children whom he loves dearly and devotedly. And now at 58, he's alone for a bit on his back porch, feet propped up to a sunset and a glass of red wine. And he's realizing for the first time, he's accomplished at least one astonishing feat in his life. He is a serial killer who never acted on the impulse. Now you can see why he didn't want me to mention his name. That's right. Okay. So, but anyway, love you, You know who you are. All right, so the last one I'll read from this book, keeping an eye on the time here. I'm a recovering Baptist preacher's kid, so I watch the clock. We're all shell-shocked, you know, but I used to give my dad, you know, the 5-minute warning when he was preaching, you know, when I was sitting on the front row or wherever I was. You know. So the last one from this book that I want to read is for a 70-year-old woman, and this is also based on a very dear friend. It's called Forward to the Past. So she moved to Santa Fe because LSD and mushrooms made more sense than iPhones. And she moved out here by herself because none of the men she loved had survived the late 1960s intact. And she remembers a few bad trips of her own, but nothing as scary as Bob Dylan's new Christmas album. So at 70, she got rid of everything but the cat and the car to put it in and drove to the Sangre de Cristos. It wasn't soon enough to do this, but it wasn't too late either. And now that she's here, the smell of pinon fires, all the indecipherable art up on Canyon Road, and the odd way people dress in this town just make her feel something like 19 again. So I'm always careful about I'm always careful about reading Santa Fe poems to Albuquerque people.
Oh no, I used to be a Santa Fe person. I love
Well, the
it.
reason is, so my wonderful friend, and I miss him so dearly, the late Tony Mares, who was an Albuquerque stalwart, and I miss Tony so much. I miss Tony so much. Tony Mares was a dear friend. I have to be honest and tell you, and any of you who knew Tony Mares would know why this is the case and that it is true. But Tony was just such a huge factor in introducing me to New Mexico. And almost everyone I know in New Mexico is a result of the wonderful Tony Mares and his incredible generosity, taking me to readings with him and saying, Nathan, you need to read here. You know, people need to hear this. You need to come, you know, and I owe him so much. And I'm so sorry that, you know, we lost him lately. But I do, one of my favorite stories about Tony is that I had read at, well, it was then the Church of Beethoven. Is that what they used to call it? And now it's, right, okay, yeah. And so I had just finished reading and we were sitting in a coffee shop and I was getting ready to leave. And Tony looks at me over the top of his latte and he goes, so, you getting ready to go back to California? I was going to Santa Fe, and that was what Tony called Santa Fe. Going back to California. So I love you, Tony. And so what I'm going to do to close with, I'm going to close with one poem here.
Can I say one thing you'll like?
Okay.
Santa Fe is to Albuquerque as Boulder is to Denver.
Which says something so totally different depending on what decade you're talking about. You know, Boulder has just changed so drastically over the last few decades, you know, and it used to be this wonderful place, and I'm not saying that it isn't, and I continue to try to love Boulder, but a lot of Lincoln Navigators in Boulder. And so, but I want to close with this poem and just tell the quick story of what it is that I'm up to right now. So as John mentioned, I make my living as a wandering troubadour. Some people say, you know, a traveling troubadour. Some people say a bum poet, you know, with no home. And so however you want to put it, that's great. But the fact of the matter is, the truth is that when March came along, I had the year of 2020 so booked solid. My calendar was loaded all the way through November, and things were going so well, and I was so excited about the year. And about mid-March, the lights began to go out on my career. it's how I make my living. I no longer teach at the university. I don't, this is how I make my living now. I do concerts, house concerts, poetry readings. I teach workshops. And by mid-April, it was as if Los Angeles had gone dark. You were up there on the hill where the Hollywood sign is and looking down over LA, and LA was dark. And that was my, the whole thing, it's gone. It's just gone. Around sometime there in April, my wife had a couple of friends. They were doing a Zoom happy hour, and her two friends said, Nathan ought to commission, tell people, have people commission poems, and they can just do a donation. It doesn't matter how small or how big. Have him write them a personalized poem and things like that. Well, to go from there, to now, I can't even explain. I can't explain what has happened. My gratitude is deep and eternal, and it's crazy. This has turned into a COVID time career. The commissions and the donations, and by the way, I've told people I do not care if it's $1. I don't care if it's $5. I've had people give all the way from 15. I have one lady who's commissioned 5 poems and has given me 800 something, I don't know. And it's everything, in between. I don't care, it doesn't matter. But you give me a theme or a topic and I will write you a poem. And those poems have now turned into a 4-book series. The first book in the series is due out actually within a couple of weeks. It's called In the Days of Our Seclusion. And it's a book of the commissioned poems. Book 2 is already almost written. It ends at the end of August. Anyway, this has saved my life. And I wanted you to tell the story. I wanted to tell you the story of the miracle of, it was so unexpected. And I'm so grateful. And it's been amazing. And it has also allowed me to connect with certain readers and certain people in my life in a way that I never would have been able to connect with otherwise. And so now that my time is up, I'm going to read this one. It's a 1/2 a page. It's a tiny poem, so don't be afraid. It's okay. I'm just going to finish with this one. And this is a poem. This is a very recent poem. And this was written for the Wall of Moms in Portland, Oregon. This was something that somebody had mentioned to me, and I went online and started researching and reading articles about it, and it just blew me away. I was like, yeah, it's always the moms. Moms have no fear. It's just, I love it so much, and everything that they have inspired. And so anyway, I'll end with this, and thank you. By the way, Hilda, I loved your reading. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I appreciate that. And John and Jules, again, thank you for keeping it alive, figuring out how to do these things. Please teach me how to do this, because I'm going to have to learn how to do this. But I appreciate you guys very much, very much. The title of the poem is called Okay, Boys, written on Friday, July 24th, and it's dedicated to the Wall of Moms. After the many things you've already had to stand and stare down for your children, a bunch of unmarked federal troops in camouflage and rental vans probably don't scare you. Moms can see right through all those helmets and dark glasses and know exactly what's behind them. Just a line of confused sons with guns, whose mothers are at home wondering what kind of trouble they're up to now. Some sons confused by seeing you there. Some as to what their orders are, all by testosterone and adrenaline. Whatever it is they're not sure of, you appear to be considerably sure about. What it is that you're sure about. And we are grateful and in awe. So lock arms, ladies. We need you now as much as we always will. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. And cheers again.
Thank you, Nathan. Cheers.
Yeah.
Always wonderful. I'm unmuting Jen right now too.
Unmute everybody.
Okay.
Everybody. All right. Nathan Brown. Let's hear for Nathan.
Thank you all. Yeah, I love it.
Ooh, cousin.
All right, Billy.
It's so great to see all your friends here. You know.
Yeah, Billy Brown, the cookie maestro.
Yeah.
I even have one. I have one.
I miss them, Billy. I miss your cookies.
We all miss Billy Brown's cookies.
I know. I need some of those chocolate chili.
Yeah.
Chili chocolate. Oh, man.
He owes us.
Hey, I'm gonna stop recording here in a minute, and I just want to add that we're going to be uploading this to the Playhouse YouTube channel. We actually have one.
Before
yeah.
you stop recording, I had a question for Nathan.
Okay.
Nathan, do you have your fire pit series? I think that's on tomorrow. Isn't it?
Yeah. I was trying to be sensitive to time, and I didn't want to go over. And John, I very much appreciate that. So one of the byproducts of the commissioned poem project, which we're kind of calling the pandemic project unofficially, and the book series has been a Facebook Live series called the Fire Pit Sessions. We have actually filmed 44 of these, if you can imagine. And session 45 is tomorrow night. And what it is it's basically a live reading. I do 2 to 3 poems and then close with a wonderful song. I'm going to be doing a Patty Griffin song tomorrow night that I can't wait. I'm probably going to cry while I'm singing it because it's just ridiculous. It's Patty Griffin's song, Mary. And these fire pit sessions have basically re-inspired and re-infused the commissioned poems project and the book project, and they're all kind of feeding each other now. But we are nearing 20,000 views on the fire pit sessions, which is kind of shocking everyone. And I'm just thrilled to death, and it just seems to be, they're about 10 to 15 minutes max, these sessions. And we also, by the way, if you go to my personal Facebook page, they have all been reposted there, and every single one of these fire pit sessions are there for those of you who are binge watchers. They're all there.
And you have to see his fire pit. This is the Taj Mahal of fire pits.
Some people call it a work of art, and some people call it a problem.
How many years did it take you?
I've been working on it, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. My wife and I disagree on how long, but it's been quite a while that I've been working on it, and it has turned into quite a thing. And by the way, one of my big celebration moments when everything is over and we can finally gather again, we are having a big fire pit gathering for anyone who can make it from as far away as you are. And we're going to have a big party at the fire pit.
We're there. We're there.
All right.
All right. I want to again thank Nathan Brown and Hilda Raz. Can you unmute and give a nice round of applause to our features?
Yay.
Wow. So much for being here. And thanks to Jules
Hilda and Nathan.
Wonderful, Nathan.
Thank you.